British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. There, she's the only splash of color in this picture, but take a close look at her tiara. When Queen Camilla demanded that Princess Catherine hand over her royal tiara, Kate Middleton is making her tiara debut as the Princess of Wales. The request stunned everyone, but no one was more furious than Prince William. Stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. The stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. And what he did next will shock you even more. The afternoon sun spilled golden light across the blue drawing room, where Princess Catherine stood arranging white roses in a crystal vase. The ritual steadied her, something simple, something hers after a week that had demanded every ounce of composure and strength. With William away on a 3-day tour, the palace felt hollow and empty, the silence pressing in on her like another burden to carry. That silence was broken by the click of Queen Camilla's shoes on the marble. Queen Camilla entered, her smile polite and practiced, yet Catherine instantly sensed there was an ulterior motive behind the smile. She had come to recognize the signs, moments wrapped in courtesy, but sharpened by intent. "Catherine, darling, I trust you don't mind me dropping in," Camilla began smoothly, before gliding into an antique armchair by the window. "There is something rather important I wish to discuss with you privately." Catherine set the roses in her hands aside, turning to hear what Queen Camilla had to say. "Of course, Queen Camilla. What is it?" "It concerns the upcoming state dinner for the Japanese delegation." Camilla's tone shifted into something firmer, more deliberate. "I have been considering the jewels, and your sapphire tiara would be absolutely perfect. Its deep blue color would harmonize beautifully with my navy gown and send a subtle yet powerful message to our Japanese friends." The words landed heavily. The George VI sapphire tiara was no ordinary ornament. It had been her wedding gift from the late Queen, a piece bound to her with meaning and memory. To part with it, even for a night, felt like parting with a piece of herself. "I had not realized you intended to wear a tiara," Catherine replied carefully, choosing her words. "Perhaps your sapphire necklace and earrings might be more fitting?" Camilla's smile thinned. "As Queen, I must create the strongest impression before our guests. A tiara conveys the full majesty of the monarchy. Surely you appreciate the importance of presenting a united family front at such an occasion." Those words cut. United family front. It was no suggestion. It was a command veiled in diplomacy. Catherine hesitated, torn between loyalty to the crown and the personal bond she felt to the sapphires. She remembered the late Queen's words, spoken softly, as if passing a blessing. "These sapphires suit you, my dear. They reflect your beauty and kindness." Now the idea of them perched on another's head, even for one evening, felt like betraying that trust. Yet standing against a reigning queen risked more than tension. It risked unraveling the fragile balance she had worked so carefully to preserve. Camilla pressed further, her voice sweetened but edged with certainty. The late Queen would have approved of such symbolism. "These jewels belong to the crown, not to one individual. Catherine, you have always shown such grace in these matters. It would mean a great deal to me, and more importantly, to the crown." There it was, the invocation of the crown, a pressure impossible to push back against without consequence. Catherine steadied her voice, though inside she recoiled. "If it is truly your wish, then the tiara will be at your disposal for the dinner." Camilla's eyes shone with quiet triumph. "How very thoughtful of you. I knew I could rely on your good sense." She rose with elegance, smoothing her gown, and leaned forward to brush Catherine's cheek with a perfunctory kiss. "You have relieved me greatly, my dear. Our guests will be most impressed." When the door closed, Catherine sank into the nearest chair, exhaling the breath she didn't know she had been holding. Her composure cracked in the solitude of the room. She looked toward the vase of white roses, once pure and calming, now stark reminders of how duty had smothered sentiment. She reached out, adjusting a single bloom as though restoring order to the flowers might restore it within herself. Duty had won the moment, but deep inside, a quiet vow stirred. The tiara would return to her keeping, and its meaning would not be forgotten. But in the palace, nothing stayed secret for long. By evening, whispers coiled through the corridors like smoke, seeping from the blue drawing room to the kitchens, offices, and stables. Within hours, every staff member knew that Queen Camilla had asked for George VI's sapphire tiara, and Princess Catherine had yielded. The story took on new colors with every retelling. Some swore Catherine had resisted until the very last. Others claimed she'd given it up with grace. But the core truth was steady as stone. The tiara was leaving her hands. Meanwhile, in her private rooms, Catherine tried to bury herself in correspondence, but her hands kept drifting to the sapphire earrings she wore. Their faint glow was she could not banish the image of that case sitting empty. Meanwhile, Lady Susan entered quietly, carrying a leather folder. "Your Royal Highness," she began softly. "I have reviewed the tiara's insurance documentation. If you wish to reconsider, there may be requirements that could offer you an honorable way forward." Catherine's head lifted sharply, a flicker of hope passing across her features. "What kind of requirements?" "Security clearance of 48 hours, Lady Susan explained. "Environmental conditions during transport. And most crucial of all, written approval from Prince William for any transfer of personal wedding gifts." For the first time since her reluctant concession, Catherine felt the weight on her heart ease, if only slightly. But by the following day, her faint hope was dashed. Queen Camilla's team moved with efficiency. Insurance waivers were signed, security clearances pushed through, environmental protocols satisfied. Every obstacle Catherine might have leaned on had been swept aside, as though anticipated long before Camilla set foot in the blue drawing room. Her agreement, she realized bitterly, had not been a choice. It had been the final stamp of approval on a plan already in motion. The night of the Japanese state dinner soon arrived. The state dining room glittered beneath 3 vast chandeliers, their crystal drops scattering 1,000 shards of light. The long table gleamed with gold-rimmed china, polished silver and cutlery fit for emperors. Diplomats, cabinet ministers, and figures of high society moved among the grandeur in silken gowns and tailored tuxedos, a stage set to impress. But Catherine was not there. Officially, her absence was explained away as a scheduling conflict. The truth, however, was far more personal. Catherine could not bring herself to stand in that room and watch the tiara, the late queen's gift, her gift crown, another woman's head. Instead, she remained in her private sitting room, the glow of the television screen, her only company. Her pulse quickened as the broadcast rolled on. First the emperor's arrival, then the formal greetings, and finally the sweeping shots of the reception. She braced herself for the inevitable. And then it came. Queen Camilla stepped into the frame, bathed in light beneath the chandeliers. The sapphire tiara blazed at her brow, its blue stones catching fire with every camera flash. It was breathtaking, everything Camilla had intended it to be. Commentators praised the choice immediately, hailing it as magnificent, the perfect pairing with her navy gown. Catherine leaned forward, her breath caught in her throat. Then she heard it. The commentator, with all the certainty of authority, attributed the tiara to the late Queen Mother. The error struck like a blow. Not only had her wedding gift been claimed visually, but now before the eyes of the world, its true story was being rewritten. By dawn, Catherine knew every newspaper in Britain, and plenty abroad, would carry the same mistake, repeating the false attribution until it calcified into public memory. Something sacred had been taken from her, not just the tiara itself, but the truth of its meaning. Still, she could not look away. On screen, every angle lingered on the sapphires, catching their fire as Camilla turned, smiled, and charmed dignitaries. Photographers clamored for the best shots, ensuring that by morning Catherine's gift would be immortalized in print as part of Camilla's crown. When the Japanese emperor admired the tiara, Catherine wondered bitterly what tale Camilla was spinning. Surely not the real one. Surely not Elizabeth's gift, given in trust. Lady Susan entered softly, setting down a tray of tea. "The cameras adored the sapphires," she said gently. Her words meant as comfort. Catherine only nodded, unable to find her voice. On screen, Camilla lifted her glass for the formal toast. The sapphires caught the light with cruel brilliance. To the world, they symbolized majesty. To Catherine, they burned with memory. Elizabeth's hands resting tenderly upon her head, whispering words of blessing. Yes, the tiara would return, but it would never again feel wholly hers. That night, something had been broken in Catherine, but this would be nothing in comparison to what Prince William would do. Prince William's return from his trip had been slowed by brutal weather. His helicopter was forced to divert to Yorkshire, turning what should have been a stress-free journey into an overnight delay. By the time he finally reached Kensington Palace, exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Yet even through his fatigue, the thought of seeing Catherine after 3 days apart lifted him. He went straight to her study, expecting the warmth of their usual reunion. But instead, he was met with something else. He found her seated at her desk, surrounded by papers and correspondence. To anyone else, she might have looked perfectly composed. But William knew better. After 14 years of marriage, he had learned to read the truth in the small things. The tense grip on her pen, the rigid line of her shoulders, and the faint tightness around her eyes. These were Catherine's tells, the signs she was holding back. Emotions too heavy to voice. "Darling, I missed you," he murmured, bending to kiss her forehead before settling into the chair beside her. "How was the Japanese state dinner?" "I caught some coverage, though the connection was dreadful." Her pen froze mid-sentence. The silence stretched, a fraction too long. "It went very well, from what I understand," she said carefully. "Very diplomatic, very successful." William frowned. Normally, she recounted such evenings in vivid detail, eager to share her impressions. The neutrality of her reply made his stomach tighten. "You didn't attend? I thought it was in your calendar." "I had other commitments," she answered softly, eyes lowered. Camilla represented the family beautifully. The tiara looked lovely on her. The words hit him like ice water. At first, he struggled to make sense of them. Then the realization landed. His jaw clenched. "She wore your tiara," he said slowly, the steel creeping into his voice. The sapphire tiara. Catherine's composure cracked. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, betraying the storm she had tried so hard to contain. The sight ignited something fierce in William. An anger that shattered the careful diplomacy drilled into him all his life. "She asked to borrow it," Catherine whispered. "She insisted it was appropriate for the delegation. I could hardly refuse without seeming uncooperative." The words burned in his chest. He turned away, pacing to the window, his hands clenched. The sapphire tiara was not just another heirloom. It was his grandmother's personal wedding gift to Catherine. He remembered her telling him privately that the sapphire symbolized Catherine's steadfast spirit, her constancy in joining the family. To see them paraded as a diplomatic prop felt like an insult to her memory. "She asked you to give her your wedding present," he bit out, "and used it to parade in front of foreign dignitaries?" "She framed it as duty," Catherine replied, her voice heavy with apology. She said the late queen would have wanted treasures like that to be worn for state occasions, that the jewels belonged to the crown, not the individual. William turned sharply. That is manipulation, nothing less. His voice shook with controlled fury. Where is it now? Still with Camilla's staff? Catherine admitted quietly. They mentioned official portraits before it's returned. That casual extension of the loan twisted the knife further. To William, it was no longer a matter of jewelry. It was an assault on loyalty, on memory, on the sanctity of a gift that had bound Catherine to his grandmother's trust. The rest of the afternoon, William made discreet inquiries, calling on the quiet network of staff who had served his family loyally for decades. And what he uncovered did not soothe him. It hardened him. The most unsettling testimony came from Patricia Hartwell, the senior dresser. She met him in private, her voice trembling with a mix of reverence and indignation. Your Royal Highness, this is not the first time. Over the past 18 months, there have been requests, personal items of Princess Catherine's. Each time framed as family duty or diplomatic necessity, William's jaw tightened. What sort of items? A few accessories, even clothing. For certain appearances, Mrs. Hartwell hesitated, then added each time the princess complied. But afterward, she seemed diminished. The staff has noticed her distress. William's anger cooled into something sharper. A cold, deliberate calculation. This wasn't one misstep. It was a pattern, a slow erosion of Catherine's autonomy, hidden beneath the guise of solidarity and duty. To him, it looked less like tradition and more like bullying. Later, in a carefully arranged meeting, Sir Edward Peaton confirmed the staff's unease. Department heads are increasingly concerned about the precedent being set, he confided. The line between personal gifts and crown property is foundational. If it blurs, it undermines centuries of protocol. Has anyone confronted the Queen directly? William pressed, his voice edged with quiet fury. Sir Edward's reply was cautious. There had been efforts through the proper channels, he admitted. But nothing had shifted the pattern. The household had reached its limit. Their loyalty to Catherine was clear, but their positions left them powerless to defend her. That responsibility now rested squarely on William. That evening, he placed a private call to his father, hoping, almost against reason, that the king might intervene. Instead, the conversation left him more disheartened than ever. Charles dismissed his concerns with weary detachment, insisting Camilla was only fulfilling her role with dignity. Jewels, Charles remarked, were meant to be worn, not locked away. William's patience fractured. That tiara was Granny's wedding gift to Catherine, he argued. It was not meant to be paraded as a stage prop before foreign dignitaries. But Charles brushed him off. William, you're being dramatic. Family members have always shared jewelry. It is tradition. The call ended unresolved, leaving William with that familiar ache of disappointment his father always seemed to summon. If Charles would not protect Catherine, then he would. Back in their apartments, he found her attempting to read, her gaze drifting from the page. He sat beside her, taking her hands. I spoke with Father. Alarm flickered in her eyes, and she urged him not to quarrel with his family. The tiara would be returned, she whispered. Let it go. But William's grip tightened. This was no longer about a tiara. It was about her dignity, her worth. Granny had given her that gift out of love and trust, a symbol that she belonged. To see it misused was to see that memory trampled. Catherine's composure broke, tears spilling as he held her close, rage and tenderness mingling in his chest. Tomorrow, he vowed, he would confront Camilla himself. The next morning, William demanded a private meeting with Queen Camilla. No aides, no witnesses. He deliberately chose the morning room at Clarence's house, a space so closely tied to Camilla that she would not mistake the encounter for a trap. He wanted it plain. This was no petty quarrel, but a reckoning. Camilla arrived on time, her smile polished as ever. But it faltered when she saw William's rigid stance and the storm in his eyes. Sinking into her chair, she offered the well-rehearsed warmth of a diplomat. William, how good to see you. How is Catherine? I so appreciated her generosity with the tiara. It made such a splendid impression at the dinner. That single word, generosity, struck William like flint against stone. He did not sit. His towering presence filled the room, making his intent unmistakable. Camilla, we need to discuss your treatment of my wife. What happened with the tiara was unacceptable. It must never happen again. Her smile cooled. I beg your pardon? She asked, tone sharpening. I borrowed a piece of jewelry for an important occasion. Catherine agreed readily. There was no issue. Catherine felt she had no choice. William shot back, his voice hardening. You twisted her loyalty to this family into pressure. That tiara wasn't just jewelry. It was my grandmother's wedding gift to her, chosen to symbolize her place here. Camilla's lips thinned. As queen, I have obligations. Presentation is part of diplomacy. That tiara served the crown by honoring our guests. William's restraint frayed. As my wife, Catherine has rights you've repeatedly ignored. This was not an isolated moment. For months, you've exploited her good nature, pressuring her to surrender what is hers. Camilla rose, steel entering her voice. That is an outrageous accusation. I have never bullied Catherine. Everything I've requested has been in service of the monarchy. But William could see Catherine's tears in his mind, the quiet suffering she had tried to hide. His control broke. You made my wife cry over a tiara that represented one of the most meaningful moments of her life. And you dared to invoke my grandmother's memory as leverage. That is manipulation, plain and simple. Camilla's cheeks flushed. Your grandmother would have understood. These jewels exist to serve the crown, not sentiment. William's reply cut like glass. That tiara was not crown property. It was my grandmother's personal gift to Catherine. She chose it to bind her into this family, not to see it paraded by anyone else. Their voices clashed, echoing against the walls. Camilla accused him of dramatics, of letting emotion cloud duty. William countered with a litany of her encroachments, each one a reminder of Catherine's forced compliance. Finally, Camilla played her trump card. I am queen. My precedence is clear. William's voice dropped to ice. You are my father's wife, but you will never have the right to mistreat mine. The confrontation shook Clarence House to its core. Though the doors had been closed, staff outside had heard raised voices and caught fragments of the clash. By afternoon, the palace's hidden grapevine carried competing versions. Some swore William had shouted about betrayal. Others whispered that Camilla had invoked her status as queen with unusual ferocity. The only certainty was that the household was divided, tension curling through every corridor. King Charles received the report from his private secretary, a careful account that could not soften the truth. He now faced an impossible choice, mediating between his heir and his wife, two people equally certain of their righteousness, neither inclined to yield. Catherine withdrew to her apartments, weighed down by guilt. She had never wanted conflict, yet her quiet compliance had ignited one of the most bitter crises in the family. Lady Susan stayed close, rescheduling engagements and offering gentle counsel. Over tea, Catherine confessed she felt she had divided the family. But Susan's reply was firm. You are not responsible for other people's choices. William defended you as any devoted husband should. Meanwhile, Camilla gathered her confidants, spinning the confrontation as an overreaction by a spoiled son unwilling to respect her. In her telling, she was the dutiful queen, unfairly maligned for doing her job. Beyond the palace walls, the press began to sense strain. Royal correspondents noticed subtle signs, the sudden absence of joint engagements, the brittle tone of official statements, the strained choreography of appearances. Whispers of discord gained momentum. Princess Anne, pragmatic as ever, attempted to intervene. She urged William privately to tread carefully. Public clashes, she warned, would only strengthen Camilla's position and make him look reckless. But William's answer was clipped. She bullied my wife into surrendering her wedding gift. Tell me, how should I have responded? with polite small talk? Anne had no reply. She found equal resistance with Camilla, who dismissed William's fury as nothing but dramatics. Neither side moved an inch. Meanwhile, ever since the event, the tiara remained in Camilla's possession, its return quietly delayed under the excuse of photography and cataloging. Its absence loomed like a ghost. Catherine could not bring herself to wear the matching sapphires, for every glimpse of their deep blue reminded her of what was missing and the storm it had unleashed. Inside the palace, even the smallest tasks had become political landmines, scheduling receptions, drafting speeches, approving wardrobe choices. Every move threatened to reveal allegiances. Departmental meetings turned into acts of survival, where loyalty was disguised as neutrality. The air itself seemed volatile, as if the entire household waited for a single spark to set it ablaze. That spark came when King Charles summoned both William and Camilla to Buckingham Palace for what he called a family discussion. But everyone understood the truth. The monarchy itself was about to be tested by the fallout of the tiara dispute. The meeting took place in the Regency Room, its gilded intimacy chosen to soften the gravity of the subject. Charles positioned himself carefully between his son and his wife, his face overwhelmed with fatigue, but steadied by resolve. He knew the crown's dignity depended on resolution, but he also understood the wounds in this quarrel were personal and deep. "We cannot continue with this level of discord," he began, his voice weighted with both fatherly weariness and sovereign command. "The institution we serve is larger than us all. Our disagreements must never undermine the duties we are bound to fulfill." William had come prepared. From his folder, he unfolded notes, calm, precise, and damning. He listed each incident of the past 18 months, when Camilla had pressed Catherine for personal items under the guise of duty. His tone was measured, stripped of the anger that had marked their private confrontation. This repeated pattern has created an environment where Catherine feels powerless to protect her belongings. He said the tiara incident was only the most visible example of behavior that cannot continue. Camilla's response was immediate, her voice smooth with practiced authority. She invoked her role as queen, the demands of presentation, and the necessity of diplomacy. But before she could build her case, Charles raised a hand, cutting her off. His expression carried none of his usual gentleness. "The sapphire tiara was a personal wedding gift from my mother to Catherine," Charles declared bluntly. "It was never part of the crown collection. Treating it as communal property was inappropriate regardless of context." The words landed like a thunderclap. For William, it was vindication. For Camilla, humiliation. Her cheeks flushed, but she said nothing as Charles pressed on. "We will now establish a clear rule," he continued. "Personal gifts, especially those from the sovereign, are private property. They will only be shared if the owner explicitly consents." William inclined his head, but did not stop there. "An apology to Catherine is also necessary," he said firmly. "She deserves acknowledgement for the distress she endured." Camilla stiffened, her pride battling the force of the king's expectant gaze. After a tense silence, she offered words that were as thin as glass. "I regret that Catherine was distressed by my request. It was not my intention to cause upset, and I will respect the boundaries we have agreed upon." The apology was hollow, but Charles ended the matter then and there. His focus was on restoring stability, not forcing contrition. That afternoon, the tiara was quietly returned to Catherine's custody. She received it with gratitude, shadowed by sorrow, knowing its meaning had been altered forever. Weeks later, when she wore it again at a private gathering, the sapphires sparkled as brilliantly as ever. Yet to her eyes, their light carried a memory of loss, of something sacred that had been bruised, though not destroyed. Publicly, the family facade snapped back into place. Joint engagements resumed, statements dripped with careful formality, projecting an image of unity. But inside palace walls, nothing was the same. William's fierce defense of his wife had redrawn invisible lines of power. Staff whispered of the change with relief, knowing Catherine was no longer unprotected, her quiet suffering no longer invisible. Among insiders, the Japanese state dinner was remembered as the night that altered everything. The tiara's sapphires still dazzled, but they carried with them the invisible weight of a crisis that hardened boundaries, shifted loyalties, and forced the monarchy to confront its fragility. The scandal had ripped away the glittering mask of royalty, exposing raw emotion, fragile loyalties, and ruthless maneuvering behind palace doors. What began as Camilla's bid to dazzle foreign dignitaries spiraled into a reckoning that left no relationship untouched. William's defense of Catherine showed the world, and the palace, that no centuries-old protocol could silence a husband's instinct to protect his wife. In his fury, the image of a future king emerged, one who valued principle over pageantry and loyalty over politics. For Catherine, the ordeal was a brutal lesson in the peril of marrying into royalty, where even a wedding gift could be weaponized. Yet her quiet dignity, combined with William's unwavering support, transformed her vulnerability into vindication. What are your thoughts on Queen Camilla's actions? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.